Welcome to episode 301 of the Filmmakers Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk
indie films. Making.
Unbelievable. From indie films to studio films and
everything in between.
How to get them made, how to make them, and how to try not to do what Dom's just done.
Royally F them up.
Yeah, in our very, very
humble opinion.
Right, great. This is episode 301. Can you believe it? And this week we have on the fantastic director, Tobias Lindholm. He is the director of films such as The Hunt, Hijacking, A War, Another Round, which is Oscar nominated for, and a film that he's here to talk about today, The Good Nurse. He joins our host Dom Lemoir with the fantastic screenwriter
Krysty Wilson-Cairns,
who you will know from this podcast, friend of the podcast.
Nothing else. That's how you should know.
Friend of the podcast. That's how you should know.
We gave her fame on that
1917. Did she? Oh, hang on. Didn't she scribble that one yet? She wrote 1917. She wrote Last Night in Soho and
Star Wars.
The Good Nurse, and Star Wars as well. Yeah. She's a superstar.
She's probably one of the only famous writers around there that's just literally a writer that is known for being a writer.
Yeah, she's blown up in the last couple of years, and this is her third time on the podcast. She's a friend of Dom's now, big time. You had drinks afterwards, right?
Working on it.
Okay, yeah. Working on it.
No, it's nice. It's really nice to meet people that you've kind of seen do these films, and it was at the Corinthia Hotel years ago.
Oh, you love going there, don't you?
We all hung out, and it's just nice to see good people doing well. And she's a great person with a good attitude.
Great. I am Giles Alderson. You have been listening to Dom Lemoir, and you're Tobias V's, aren't you?
I think I am, yes.
Yeah, he's the editor of this podcast, and you heard his lovely voice on last week's episode, 300th episode. I hope you enjoyed that one, by the way. That was the first of its kind, apart from my Christmas specials, where we're just going to chat with the hosts. So we're going to do more of that. Thank you for your feedback. Some lovely, lovely comments. You're amazing for doing so. So yes, we will be doing more of that, more of those chats with our hosts. And next time, I imagine that Ian Sharp, Dan Richardson, Lucinda Rhodes Thakra, Andrew Roger, and Robbie McCain will be able to join us. So fingers crossed for that.
You'd think so. You'd think so.
You'd think so. You'd think so. We'll mix it up. We'll mix it up. And if you haven't seen my socials this week or last week, the trailer for 3-Day Millionaire has dropped. It is out in cinemas on November the 25th. It's very exciting.
What a great trailer.
Thank you. Yeah. And the poster. Yeah.
The poster's amazing.
Tobias was hit over the head with that.
And Dom's film, When the Screaming Starts, is out as well now on all good and evil streaming platforms. So do go support indie filmmaking. Tobias, what have you got that people can watch right now that you've made?
You can. I don't know.
Well, you did all the translations on Wolves of War from English to German. You wrote those scenes. You're massively influential in helping me write that. So yes,
you can watch Wolves of War. Yeah, and you probably hear me scream in the background.
Yes. You did some of the voiceovers for it. All the the looping. That's right. Any more Giles films we can promote? Right
There's too many already.
There's too many. It's ridiculous. Stop it.
It's a strange number of films.
Yes, stranger in our bed number of films. Stop it.
Well, I'm very excited about this episode because I'd coincidentally just watched 2 seasons of Borgen. Completely, I had no idea that this interview was coming. And Tobias
Lindholm
had written them, and it's a really brilliant series. It's amazing acting. It's got that kind of Danish, slight sort of Scandinavian edge to it, but it's basically like a sort of a Danish West Wing. Yeah, he's a really good guy, and this is a really interesting chat that we had, and probably my first hour-long studio interview, which was actually quite slightly terrifying, but I think I'd done so many over the sort of preceding days that it went really well. So I'm very proud of these chats and what we learnt from these 2 fantastic people.
Yeah, you should be. I'm proud of you. It's not easy to do, and to lead them, well done, especially in person. So amazing.
The Good Nurse is an absolutely incredible drama, starring Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne. I had the pleasure of meeting Eddie, who introduced me to Tobias, and the producer Scott Franklin. So that was a pleasant sort of precede to the interview.
That's really cool. Yeah.
It's a cool person to be introduced by.
Absolutely, yeah. You're like, oh, my friend Eddie. Yeah, piss off, Eddie. I'm trying to have a chat here. It is The Good Nurse is out in cinemas now, and it is on Netflix on the 26th of October. So it's literally days away. Go support this film. You're going to love it. Really, really cool. It's a gripping thriller based on true events. So this is 2 Oscar nominees, and very recent Oscar nominees as well. So what a joy for you guys to listen to on the 301st episode. Incredible true story of The Good Nurse with our premier hosts Dom Lenoir and Tobias Lindholm and Krysty Wilson-Cairns. Enjoy.
So, Krysty, welcome back to the Filmmakers Podcast. We're delighted to have you on the podcast again.
Thank you.
And you're making a habit of premiering your films at the LFF, which is
I am.
quite a thing.
Well, it's local. It's right around the corner from my flat and my office, so you know.
Convenient.
Very handy. That's it. It's mostly convenience.
So how does it feel? You've got an amazing film out, The Good Nurse. Watched it last week. How are you doing at the moment?
I'm really happy. You know, I love watching films in cinemas with an audience, and we got to see it at TIFF with an audience for the first time, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it like my home turf. Yeah, I'm ecstatic, and I love that the festival's back. It seems to be in full proper kind of force after the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, Cannes this year was the first one where I'd gone back, and it was just, there was just everything was on, people were there, parties, canapes.
Oh, okay.
It really felt like the industry had returned.
We missed the canapes, didn't we?
Yeah.
That wasn't getting happening. That was pure COVID that was just being spread before.
They're making a slow comeback. I'm campaigning strong for them. So how did this fantastic movie come to you? Because if I'm correct, we met you here for 1917 a few years ago.
Did.
And I heard yesterday at the speaking to, I think it was the director or the producer, that this was in the pipeline beforehand.
Yes, this was my first paid job.
Wow.
10 years ago, I pitched for this and got it. And what happened was, so my script Ether went on the blacklist. I signed with an American agent, CA, who I love, and they sent me, a stack of books to read that were like open assignments that were out there in the ether. Pun intended. And
appreciated.
This was in the stack, and I remember going like, I don't really want to do another serial killer movie because my first script had been very murdery, and I was like, I'm not really interested in it. And I thought I'll read the first chapter and I'll say no, but with some authority. And then I actually stayed up all night reading the book because Charles Graeber's book is so well written, so well constructed. You keep thinking you've reached, this is the peak horror. Oh my God, this is the moment. And it just goes and goes and goes. And then the last third of that book, you meet Amy, who's agent Amy in the book, was a confidential informant. And I remember thinking, this is the film. This is it.
Oh, the last third.
The last third. So it's like single mum, working class, nurse, shouldn't have to be the one to stop a serial killer. It should be the cops, it should be the system, it should be the hospital, it should be anything else other than her. And it falls at her feet. And I thought, that's the story I want to tell. Because I had no idea how you go in with Charles Cullen, how you make him the lead. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I don't think I even could today. But back then, it was always Amy. And yeah.
How do you even begin to adapt a novel like that? I mean, choosing the scenes. I mean, you've picked the third, okay?
Yeah, you picked the third. You've narrowed it down slightly.
But how do you sort of think? Okay, well, this is exactly where we're going to start the movie, because it does start with her.
Yes.
And I think it's really good that it does start with her. And I think as an audience, you're also thinking, oh, where's Eddie? When's he going to come in? But you get the time to sort of, I suppose, immerse yourself into her journey and the sort of the struggle of, the industry, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I would love to tell you that I did it all on my own and I'm a genius. But actually, the truth of the matter is that you sort of have fantastic collaborators. And way back at the beginning, it was Scott Franklin, Josh Stern, Darren Aronofsky. And we talked a lot about it. And in part of my research, I got to go and work 2 weeks of night shifts at a burn unit, Connecticut, shadowing nurses. I got to meet the cops. I spent a lot of time with Charles Graeber and got full access to his archives. And he introduced me to the real Amy. And I spent a weekend with her. And even at the time then, I was like, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to construct this. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to kind of wrangle this story that feels like smoke a lot of the time. And she told me that she actually had a heart condition during this time period where she thought she was going to die, and that one time she collapsed on shift and Charles then essentially nursed her. I remember thinking, well, okay, there's the most important kind of midpoint shift of the film, is this that she's dying. And that allowed me to then understand the sort of structure, how the story should be told. And then I suppose the other, MVP is obviously Tobias Lindholm, who when he came on board, which was probably about 6 years ago, that Tobias and I were working together. When he came on board, he was like, everything that's not truth has to go. He's like, the scariest version of this story is the truest version of the story. And he was so right. And so we stripped a lot of stuff out that had kind of gunked together over the years. And we thinned it all down and we just leaned really into Amy, really into humanity, and really into what it takes to actually stop someone like Charles Cullen. And so, yeah, I guess with a lot of help is how you tell that story.
Was it shocking? Like, I mean, from our perspective, we're in the UK. You break a leg, you have a heart attack, you go into the hospital and someone sorts you out, basically, like, unless it's like really
and
cosmetic.
then you don't get hit by a bill that means you can't eat for 3 months, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Crucial.
or just literally die because you can't afford it.
It's so jarring to me. Obviously, I listen, the NHS has its problems, but ultimately it's probably the greatest thing we as a country have ever done, because you don't have to go homeless because your kid has leukemia. Imagine. So I'm a big fan of socialised healthcare, and I really felt from the moment I started reading the book and through all my research that I don't think Charles Cullen would have been able to kill for as long as he killed in any other system unless you have profit over patients. And the American healthcare system ultimately is profit over patients. And so I think you're always going to have bad people who do bad things, but the fact that he could do it for 9 years in many different hospitals and kill almost 400 people, or maybe more than 400 people, we don't know, feels like it could only happen in that system.
I kind of feel like the way that you put together the story, he's one of the bad guys, and the lawyers and the kind of the medical institution are the other bad guys. I mean, how did you balance that? I mean, all of the different hospitals that turned it away, and then creating characters. Because I mean, the female sort of lawyer or representative has a little bit of a conscience that sort of develops as you go through.
Yeah.
And then the colleagues are a little bit more ruthless. And how did you sort of balance that so it feels authentic but also carries the truth?
I mean, well, you just double down in truth, right? That's the only way you can really tell that story. And I think the thing is like I'm sure the person who Kim Dickens' character, I'm sure who inspired it, was remorseful and was worried about what she was a part of, but she was just trapped in the system. And I think so many of us feel totally overwhelmed by the systems around us, not just in America, but here, even in politics at the moment. You feel totally inconsequential. How can you make a change? And I think a lot of people in these systems were just working to what the system wants. And then you hit someone like Amy, who's like, the system's wrong. Okay, well, how do we fix this problem? And that's it. I mean, that's the real takeaway for me, is like, in broken systems, you still have the ability to put your hand up and say, guys, this can't work this way. This can't be this way. We have to make changes. I think a lot of people in the hospital systems maybe didn't feel remorseful, and I hope they never sleep again.
Did Eddie's character, was it a conscious choice to sort of compartmentalize him? So he had the sort of the character that's basically very caring to the family, but then he's this ruthless killer, and you didn't mix them, like you did keep them in two compartments.
That's quite true to life. So the real Amy always said to me that Charlie was her best friend. He was funny and he was really quite shy and he didn't like the hospital, but not in a way that you were like, oh, he's killing patients. So no one really knew. And I think, because the film is from Amy's perspective, Amy's point of view, we can do that. We can stay with her, and you don't ever have that moment where, you see Charlie secretly murdering someone and then you come back to Amy and the audience gets ahead of her and you feel like she's silly. We went the way Amy experienced it. So she moved through it thinking, this guy is great. He's my best friend. He's helping keeping me alive. He loves my daughters. He's like my safe person. And then one day the police arrive and are like, we think he might be killing people and we think your hospital's covering up.
It's a powerful drama.
Yeah.
Could you just give us the redacted pitch just to finish off, please?
Yes. So The Good Nurse is the story of America's most prolific serial killer, or so we'd like you to think, so you put your bums in seats. But what it's actually about is one woman, Amy Lowren, a nurse who caught America's most prolific serial killer.
Amazing.
How's that?
Amazing. Well, let's play the trailer.
Hey.
What's going on?
Just, work's been pretty awful without you there. You and I were partners.
I don't want to talk about work.
Is it because what they're saying is true?
So, how are the girls?
They're really good, but I'm working a lot.
You still owe me for last Friday, but it can wait, really.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No.
There's 50. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Bye, Mom. Love you guys.
Nurse Lochran, this is Officer Braun.
Do you remember Anna Martinez?
Yeah, her death. It was sudden.
Mind taking a look at this?
The insulin in her system, it's a double medication error, which is really rare.
We understand that you work with a Charlie Cullen. Could he be involved in this?
Hey there, lovebirds. I cannot get over how cute your Vanessa is.
Who's Vanessa?
Oh my God. There's insulin in her system.
Go in room 103. Go in room 103.
He's been at 9 hospitals. 9.
What do you mean? No, the hospital would have done something.
You would think so.
Yeah. Do you remember working with someone named Charlie Cullen?
Yeah. There was a rumor about him. They found insulin
In a dead guy's saline bag. Hey, girls.
Come, sit.
Why are you being weird, Mom?
He's been killing people without ever touching them. He's gonna get a new job, and it's all gonna continue.
I hope you guys can hear me.
He's walking right now. Hey.
Great.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure.
And that's it. That was our conversation with the rather brilliant Krysty Wilson-Cairns. Moving on now to our main chat of this episode with the Oscar-nominated director Tobias Lindholm. Enjoy!
Tobias, welcome to the Filmmakers Podcast.
Thank you.
Met very briefly yesterday, had a very nice brunch. There's some good food there. How are you feeling? You've got your film in the London Film Festival. This must be a very exciting moment for you.
It's so exciting, and it's exciting to actually, post-pandemic, be back with a live audience and to be able to travel with films like this. I've forgotten the joy of meeting the audience, actually. So yeah, I'm thrilled.
I think it was definitely a challenge to get back into it. Like I remember when I started going back to networking events and film screenings, people were hesitant at the start, and it didn't people didn't dive straight back into that kind of camaraderie and the joy of going to see a film at the cinema. And it's so nice to be back this year, I think.
Oh, definitely. And there was like a paranoia as soon as somebody would cough inside the theater, right? You would be like, should I leave? It seems like we've been, returning to now just sharing the intimate moment of cinema.
So how did this all begin for you, this amazing project, The Good Nurse, which I watched yesterday? Amazing film, really powerful drama. How did it all begin?
Well, I got sent the first draft of Krysty's script and read it on the flight over, actually, when I was on my way over to do Mindhunter with Fincher. So it's a while ago. And finishing the screenplay, I afterwards read Charles Graeber's book and realized that Krysty was on the path of something original here, because we had the opportunity of telling, a serial killer story, but seen from the perspective of the woman who stopped him, an everyday hero. That reminded me of my own mother, but who had, the strange capacity of reminding a serial killer of his own humanity. And I thought that was a very original take on a pretty beaten genre.
And as the script came to you, you've obviously got a writing background. How was that kind of process in terms of having read the novel, having read the script? What was the writer part of your brain thinking when you first kind of read it and you thought, okay, I'd like to direct this?
I remember thinking now I have the luxury that other directors have had when I was in the writer's chair, of giving notes and leaning back, and then clearly realizing that wasn't possible. So Krysty and I engaged in a great journey together. She would do the writing and I would lean on her. I mean, she's a great writer, so it wasn't like I needed to chip in and actually sit by the keyboard and do the typing, but I could read what she had done and then only focus on how to humanize or make the scenes even more truthful, which I think it made sense in the point that I wasn't writing, so I could read from a distance. It didn't feel like it was right here like it is when I'm writing it myself. I could kind of keep it out in an arm's length. And
there's an objectivity, isn't there?
In some way, and then that really helped me. But maybe it's just the fact that Krysty is such a brilliant writer that helped me. Who knows?
And I mean, how's it in the Danish kind of health care system? Because for me, English person, hearing about the horrors that go on with that world, if you break your arm, you there's nothing you can do about it if you don't have insurance. The whole system. Like, how was it getting your head around that from your perspective?
Well, it was basically reading the book, understanding it, and trusting the real Amy that helped us, but then also just remembering how dehumanized all systems can become if we're not careful. And if that's the Danish welfare system or if that's the American healthcare system, it doesn't really matter. It's all about seeing where there is lacks of humanity. And Amy's story was a proof that there definitely was a lack of humanity in the American healthcare system, at least in Pennsylvania and New Jersey when these crimes happened.
So the script comes to you. What's the next part of the process for you? Was the finance in place? Because it's been through a few iterations before you sort of finally got to direct it.
Well, I was waiting to find the right project to be the bridge between, my safe home in Copenhagen and then US. I had a long conversation with Scott Franklin, the producer of the film, about how I wanted to make films and maybe even more how I didn't want to make them. I had seen Scandinavian colleagues ended up making films in the American or in the Hollywood film system that they shouldn't have made, or films that they didn't want to make, but ended up making just because the way the systems works. And I was very aware that if I were replaceable, if it wasn't my project, then it wouldn't make sense for me to make it. And luckily, Scott Franklin, the producer of Darren Aronofsky, is used to a director knowing what he wanted. So he promised me all of that right away. That was never a problem. And then we went on the journey together. I remember meeting Amy as the first thing after reading the screenplay, just to make sure that the version that I saw Krysty being, pointing at was actually true. It was hard to imagine that she was so heroic. It was hard to imagine that her life was such a symbol of the whole dilemma in the film. I mean, she herself had a heart disease and she was caring for other people, yet she couldn't get care herself. It almost seemed too good to be true in the sense of storytelling. So that was the next step, to meet her and to confirm this. And then it was to dive into the book and talk to Charles Graeber, the writer of the book. I always, when we do these films,
because you used the last third of the book as well, didn't you?
That's right. So, we kind of used the whole book as a Bible on how to understand the system, but we wanted Amy's story to be in focus. But I always try to ask myself, if this was a documentary, what would it look like? What scenes would present themselves
Is that
to the
sort
world?
Of coming down to truth?
Either it's coming down to truth, or it's at least shutting out my own imagination. I remember when I was 7 years old and I was playing with these, toy soldiers, and I just realized suddenly, they don't have any emotions. They can't die. This is all nothing. And I kind of feel the same way with my own imagination. I don't find that especially fascinating. I do find the world around me fascinating and the truth of that. And how do we portray real life events? I'm educated as a screenwriter, and it's so weird to say this, but I realized that the best dialogue in films have always been in documentaries. And I realized that in film school, and I was like, so how do we understand the logic of reality? How do we transport that into the condensed version of fiction? And that became the sport, both in this and other projects. Charles Graeber helped me a lot with that, and then clearly starting to look into hospitals and routines with nurses slowly a visual version of this started to build and emerge in terms of we have a theme with pipes with water in them, or these tubes with connecting the IV back to the patient that becomes a visual language throughout the movie, and that all started quite early on in the fogged and chaotic first thoughts on how to capture this.
So is that kind of part of the process for you? You're trying to keep the truth of the actual story. So the sort of the tone is that one of the main ways you felt that you sort of put your directorial spin? Because it's difficult to create a tone when it's a true story, and you don't want to obviously go over the top. We talked about that earlier. I mean, I noticed it's the hospital is a very oppressive environment. When you sort of get there, you really feel the tiredness of the staff working there. But there's also kind of a quiet, and everyone's busy. Like, how did you kind of put together this vision for your own?
I think it's simple. I think it's all about finding the elements. It's like storytelling is connecting all the dots, all the small events that all together becomes the story. And I think all the details from real life are those dots. And if we don't get them right, then we will be at some point, limping in the wrong direction. We'll end up walking in circles instead of telling the story. So basically down to understanding, how would the room where the IV bags were hanging, what would that be? How would that be set up? In real life, made me understand the system that the film basically is criticizing, down to its details. And I found that extremely important from the beginning, because if we knew that, and if that could kind of grow into the DNA of this film, then we would be able to liberate ourselves when we were shooting and just be present in what we could trust was a version of reality.
So how was your process of picking your HODs, your production designer, your cinematographer especially?
I had a lot of meetings, and basically I needed people who, like me, was fascinated with documentaries, who understood the quality of realism. Or not even realism, but naturalism. I've always thought that there's a big difference between, classic European social realism, which has a sort of political statement built in it. It looks at the individual as a prisoner of a certain social group.
Yeah, or backdrop, yeah.
A backdrop. And naturalism is basically just a kind of valueless look at, reality. And there's a big difference in the two. And we talked a lot about that, especially Jodie Lee-Leibs, the DP, and I, how could we yet have a quality to the camera work and still neutralize it in a way so it would just serve the bigger picture.
Do you kind of work with mood boards? Were there reference films that you were kind of looking at? I mean, you're talking a lot about realism, so I'm guessing you're kind of going into the material rather than that direction, maybe?
Yeah, I don't really believe in, for me, in mood boards and I had a teacher in film school who said, if you don't have a point, PowerPoint. And it's kind of, I'm not going out to shoot a film to prove that I'm right. So if I sit down and I make decisions in a lookbook, then I've already made decisions on what this movie should be. And it would be kind of locked and, in my eyes, a little dead. I think it's interesting to go out, without any comparisons other than like a scientist, where you need to keep the answers open. You need to go out and search. You're not there to say, this is the truth and then prove it. It's like, what is actually happening here? So I didn't want to lock us too much in, but we did, of course, make some deals on, or agreements on how to do this. And one thing that I liked was that the camera or the frame would represent the system. So every time we would set up a new scene, it would be, how do we portray the individual in the system? And looking at the film, you can see that we slowly, as Amy realizes what's going on, we're shooting closer and closer to Charlie, which makes him more and more a prisoner of the world he's in. His space to move in basically becomes smaller and smaller. In the diner scene, for example, where she's pushing him to get a confession, half of the frame is black, and it's basically the neck of Jessica's, well, she's leaning up against, of her chair. So we're filming that, and that's half of it, and then the rest is basically Eddie's face. And as soon as he's moving, he's kind of moving out of the system and then back in. And the fact that he could move out there and there would be something we couldn't see because we didn't move the camera with him, made it extremely exciting.
I noticed that in one of the first shots of the film when he's in by the television screen, and you take a really interesting, instead of going straight into the sort of TV hospital drama resuscitation, you're actually sort of he's sort of hidden a little bit. You're like, who is this guy? And it sort of slowly zooms in, and it's a really fascinating sort of way to approach it.
It is, and it was also just my love letter to The Verdict, where you would zoom in on Paul Newman as he is playing pinball and drinking in that bar, and you're just like, what's up with this guy? Why is he just standing there? Why is nothing else happening? Was so effectful in that film that it felt given to salute that, and then it gave Eddie a chance that I didn't think of before I saw it in the edit. But Eddie had to find a physicality, because that was the only thing that isn't that scene. He's just a spectator, right? He's watching the other nurses fight for a patient's life. And there he is in the corner, and he had to find the shape of Charlie right there. And we shot that at the first day. So I think that gave him an opportunity to find, to make decisions on who is Charlie. And it gave me an opportunity to see where I felt it was effective and where we really could, peel off more layers into the Charlie that Eddie was portraying.
And so, I mean, in terms of your grip gear and the way that you chose to actually shoot the film, was that all influenced as well by sort of creating a naturalness? I mean, because you can go into documentary shooting but then you might have a forced documentary feel, which is then, again, it's something that sort of draws you out of the film.
Right. I mean, I've done many movies with a handheld camera, and I think a handheld camera works when you want the audience to be in an illusion of this happening while you're watching it. But this is based on a true story that we all know happened, and he was captured in 2003, so everybody knows that that's not the truth. So we couldn't keep that illusion alive. So instead, we had to make other rules for the look of it, and I think the only way to do it was to make as observing a camera as possible, and then fill life into the frame instead of camera bringing life to the world. So when we look down a hallway, we're just there. And whatever life is in that hallway, we get. Nothing more, nothing less. And we can't make it more exciting by moving the camera. The camera is nobody. The camera is not even the audience. The camera is the frame into this world. And by doing that, it was never like a surveillance camera kind of idea, but nevertheless, it gave us an opportunity to say, okay, this world that we're portraying exists. The camera is our window in. Where do we really want to watch to see this from? Is it from the distance or is it close up? And that idea defined a lot of days.
One of the shots I really enjoyed was, it's just a kind of a wide shot, and it's around the kind of central desk of the hospital, and you've got the kind of medicine cabinet in the background, and you're not really sort of poking into the medicine cabinet. And I think a lot of traditional sort of hospital dramas of any kind, you'd have people rushing across, beds, emergency rooms. Everyone's interacting with each other all the time, and it's almost distracting in a way. There are all these dramas going on, but they're not always in the place that you're showing. And I think that was a really interesting sort of choice of yours.
It's funny. I talked to my good old friend Thomas Winterberg that did movies with over the last decade, and we always talked a lot about that in real life, nobody is waiting for the drama to begin, right? We're just living our lives. And then suddenly, while we're just about to marry somebody else, we're falling in love with a new one, and it creates drama. But we don't want it in our lives. The same way we need to treat these setups. It's not like, so just because we chose the window to be here, we have to fill it up with life. It needs to be over there. And once in a while, when you place a camera, everything that happens is outside the frame. And that's okay. We should not hunt the turning points and the most drama all the time. We should just be available and then let life play out. And
do you like shooting a lot of takes? Do you like sort of using masters? Is that kind of something that you've really found in your work?
Well, with these great actors, it was we made a deal to say, let's make sure that we get in the first wide shots, or the first shots we do. Mainly, we would start with a wide shot and then move in like you normally would do. Once in a while, I would, with Eddie, do the opposite, and we would start in a close-up and then end up in the wide shot, which allowed Eddie to find the truth of the scene slowly, once in a while. Jessica is extremely disciplined. So when she has found in the wide shot the truth of the scene, she's extremely good at reproducing it without leaving anything behind. So what we did when we rehearsed the whole film, we agreed that we would always do takes where we were 100% loyal to the agreements we had done already and to what we had prepared. And as soon as we had that, not a take before or after, as soon as we had that, we let it go and I allowed them to do whatever they wanted. Because sometimes doing what we had planned, they would realize another truth that was more interesting. And often in the edit, it would end up being a mix between the two. So, basically it would be like The Master, where we are very loyal to the script, and then we'd start to search for more truth as we played along.
And I think it's important when you're doing something that's so drama-based that you are focusing on working around the actors and making sure what they've got is motivating for them, rather than, a lot of sort of technique is okay, we'll change the camera, this is the camera we're going to use, it's going to go from here to here. Yeah. The actor maybe doesn't quite click with, okay, I need to do this for this reason. And then you're sort of losing the performance, which is, the most important thing. That's
always been my process, and that's the deal I made with Eddie and Jessica from the beginning, was that we would never capture them in what the film wanted. We need to follow these human beings. And I mean, it's kind of logical when we make a story that celebrates humanity. If we wouldn't allow humanity to dictate the film, but want a technique to dictate it, then suddenly we would be slaves of another system. So the only logical way to do this was to allow them to be free within limits. Clearly. And do you feel it's important to shoot wides at times? I think it's so fascinating to see the body language that an actor brings, how they to react to their environment, how they live in the space that you've sort of created for them. It was interesting, and they both went to, for those two, they went to nursing school. They took it so serious that we all felt that portraying nurses, especially post-pandemic, we needed to be very loyal and truthful to the environment they worked in. And clearly when we finally had the set and we were able to go in and shoot there, I think a 10-year younger version of me would have said, well, we're not going to show you the set until we start to shoot. And then have that surprise, that curiosity. But in this case, we were portraying nurses who have been there for years and done this again and again and again. So I allowed them to do nursing school and rehearse in the set as we were building it. And did you always have these two amazing actors as your leads in mind? How did the actual audition process come? I remember being in a meeting with Scott Franklin, the producer, and we talked about, I think we had gotten a list from the studio with male names that could greenlight the film. That's part of the system, right? And it was the most boring conversation I've ever had. So we kind of decided to put that page away and corporate conversation. It was like it's an inhumane conversation. It's a conversation about how many tickets did this actor sell in his last film. It had nothing to do with what we were doing. So instead of that, we just started to talk about movies that we had seen lately that really moved us. And Scott Franklin said, I just saw Theory of Everything, and I think Eddie Redmayne. And I remember as soon as he said it, it just clicked that's it. It's going to be Eddie. He's great. And 3 days later, I met him in London. And I think it's a very inspired choice. I mean, Jessica's a classic example. She would definitely do this role amazingly. But Eddie, it's such a transformative role from, I think, some of the expectations of him, and it is probably the most transformative since Theory of Everything. And I think it's really, really great the way you've sort of created this duplicitous character. How was it creating the two compartments? Because he's obviously he becomes a very close friend, but then working on this dark side of him. Well, the fun thing was that we had expected to have to go into this journey into the darkness together, and basically Eddie is like, as you've seen, 90% of the time, he's a really nice guy in the film. So there wasn't that much darkness. It was much more the darkness in the imagination of the audience and in Amy that we were creating. Eddie is an extremely nice guy, and he's very, very professional. So it was a joy to work with him. I felt blessed every day going home from set. And I would say I agree that it's almost expected that Jessica is great, but let's just take a minute here and celebrate how crazy that is, that you can always just expect a great performance. Zero Dark 30 was the first film ever where I bought a ticket straight from the 3 p.m. show to the 5 p.m. show. I just wanted to see it again. And her humanity and the cold the cold and restrained way she kept that in Zero Dark was for me some of the best I've ever seen. It brings her right up there with Meryl Streep, if you ask me. So to even have the ambition or hope that she could do something just near that almost felt, arrogant. But I did, and luckily she said yes. And I've been blown away by her performance every day. Not many actresses are able to come in with that energy and with that honesty and just serve the story. She would wear this earwig, and we would then play heart rhythms into her ear. So whenever she would have a problem with her heart, she would have an earwig, and then I would turn up the volume and the speed of the heart. So would suddenly be here in the ear, so she could start to, physically react to what she was feeling. And that all came from her. That was her process, finding the truth in the character. I was amazed by how, brilliant this expected brilliance was.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal performance. How did you work on the rehearsal? Did you have time for rehearsals with the main sort of cast before the shoot?
I always insist on time to rehearse. I think the only way to be totally free when we shoot is to rehearse and know the material and make the decisions or make decisions beforehand and then open it up as we get there. Because of the pandemic, we were not able to meet on stage and work without masks on, but we could meet in my home. So we would meet in my apartment and work for weeks. In a normal, everyday live environment, having tea and lunches and just talking and doing scenes and taking it to the floor and then going back to the kitchen table and talking about, what we could improve. And so that was a very organic process, surprisingly, as me moving over to do my first American feature.
And how was it doing your first American feature? I mean, you've got a lot of work behind you, but was this a big difference in terms of how the systems work?
There was more people, but in Denmark and here, I always insist that everybody there are filmmakers. So every morning we will meet up and I would talk through the full day. Why are we doing these scenes? What is happening? So that everybody, the ones who makes the coffee and the ones who's, carrying the cables, whatever, all of them are there because they want to be part of making a film. So we would all join and talk about it. And in that way, it became a very intimate, family of people that created a film together. So it didn't feel that different. Maybe also because, my producer protected me very much from the system that I didn't know. So maybe I just didn't see it, but I never felt any different.
Did you kind of feel any pressure working with that level of actors? I mean, you'd worked with some pretty impressive talent before, but were you thinking, okay, this is the American system, I'm away from home, is there a challenge there?
I never thought about it that way. I've been part of the sausage factory long enough to not be, blown away by we kind of know what happens behind the curtains, but, soccer players and bicycle riders and UFC fighters, those are the ones who really starstruck me. But, actors, filmmakers and musicians, we kind of know that it's just a lot of hard work and bravado. So I never felt that. I clearly felt that the system, I knew, in Denmark, I'm used to making films with my 9 close friends, and I'm putting up the poster the night before the premiere on my own in Copenhagen. So it's different in that way. But the process and the working with the talent around me was basically the same. And it's all about making yourself available to find the truth. And as long as I'm not there to prove that I'm right, then I'm never in a position where I'm on the line. It's always just the truth.
It's always a discussion. And it's always finding out rather than implementing.
Exactly, and it's not necessarily a discussion between me and the talent. It's or an actor or a DP. It's a conversation between all of us, finding it. And then clearly it's my responsibility to be the captain once in a while and say, now we're going to sail this way. But I think that the search for truth is where the film is made. The decisions, when they're made, then it's just to do it. So it's in that area before you know exactly what you're going to do that everything is created.
And how did you learn to write there? I mean, it's not the structure of both novels and screenplays are very precise. I mean, I think I learned purely by watching films.
There you go.
And I think film taste does come into it a lot. I think if you have a good taste and you know what makes a good movie, what versus what doesn't make a good movie, and you sort of have a general idea in the background of your mind. Is that how you learned? You didn't sort of go through the Save the Cat and all those kind of screenwriting novels and sort of structural lessons?
I'm not a big, self-help book kind of guy. I got into film school, right? And suddenly, every Monday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., I was just in a theater watching movies with a guy telling me why these movies was important. And that itself was a big education and part of my understanding of what a scene was. And then Mogens Rukov, the more or less inventor of the dogma movement and a big influence on Danish films and the writer together with Thomas Vinterberg on Celebration, he was the teacher at film school at that point. And he said something very simple to me that made me understand what screenwriting is. He said, a screenplay can only be what we can see and what we can hear. And it's the combination of the two that makes us feel something. And it's pretty simple. But it's far away from literature where you are, able to express emotions and all kinds of stuff. A screenplay is very practical. What can the audience see and hear? And how do we combine the two into emotions? And him saying that didn't make it easier, but at least I had an understanding of what path I was on. What was it that I needed to try to understand? The connection between what we see and what we hear and how we observe the world. And that's an expression of us having something in common, sharing a humanity between us, which makes us both connect to a thing we see and a thing we hear, and then we feel something. And very often we feel the same watching that. That's magical. And him saying that was like, whoa, suddenly I understood all the stuff I didn't understand, but at least I have an idea of, what to look for.
Yeah, I've always found films, to me, it's a cathartic experience, and it's always about feeling something, and it's all very well to mentally connect, but it is the emotion of connecting with a character or a story, especially if it's one outside of your own sort of background, that is so incredibly rewarding. And I think the kind of projects that you've done have always been quite emotionally charged.
Thank you.
So that's definitely to your credit. So you've done film school.
Yeah.
You've made a couple of shorts.
No shorts.
No shorts, okay. Straight into TV was your first writing job?
So I wrote in film school, and then Thomas Vinterberg called me a couple of days before I started.
Who you've collaborated with a couple of projects.
Yeah. So I didn't know him, but when I got out of film school, he called me and said, do you want to write my next feature? I was like, what? Sure. And it was based on a novel called Submarino and became our first film together. At the same time, I was starting to develop Borgen with two other guys, because we had this idea that it could be fun to make a Danish version of West Wing, and we had no illusion that it would ever be greenlit, but it did. So suddenly I was quite busy.
So did the film school kind of connect you to these people? Like, is it that kind of school where you're immersed into the industry? Because you mentioned your connection with Thomas, for instance.
So the Danish industry is so small, so everybody kind of knows each other. I didn't know anybody, but going into film school, I made a lot of friends out there, and I guess that Thomas's producer was part of the team of people that accepted me at film school. So he had kept an eye out, and I think pointed in my direction.
And what was the experience of working on submarines as your first sort of major thing out of film school?
So working with Thomas for the first time was great because it made me realize that I could do this. I was with one of my heroes, like the best we had in Denmark, this young rock star that did Celebration, and I actually felt, not that I couldn't learn anything, don't get me wrong, but at least I felt like I was, in the right field. And that gave me a thirst for more.
And then Borgen, of course, which I've just been watching, coincidentally, not as recent. I've just smashed through the first 2 seasons. Yeah. I was literally binge watching it around every other thing that I've been watching, because it's addictive and it's very good, and it is very much a Danish West Wing. And I think one of the things I like about it, which is kind of in all of your work, is the humanity of the characters, because there's all this politics, but you have to represent the different parties. Some of them have very very out there views, which are hard to humanize. How did you sort of work on creating all of those? Is it completely accurate to the sort of the Danish political system, or was there a lot of creative license taken there as a starting point?
No, so the ambition was to create an exact copy of our system, but then make new parties, so we wouldn't allow the audience to just have sympathy with whoever they would vote for in real life, but make it a little more difficult to navigate in. It is a coalition government, which means that we have, right now, I think there's like 9 or 10 parties in government. There's election just been announced. So now, campaigning is on, and we'll see a lot of people promising, the audience or the electors, the voters, a lot of things, and then they have to come in together and do a compromise afterwards. So that's like the basic system, which is interesting. And there's 189 seats in the Danish parliament, so you need to count to 90 every time you have, you want to pass something, you need to have 90 votes behind it. That system we took and we copied it, and then we populated it with characters that we liked. For example, we had never had a Danish female prime minister at the time. We invented Birgitte Nyborg, and a couple of years later, we had the first female prime minister. And I remember one thing that struck me.
Did the show preempt it?
We got a thank you card from the prime minister when she was elected, so I think she thought so.
I mean, she's a phenomenal prime minister in the show.
Oh, she is.
All of the characters are so well defined.
And one of the famous real prime ministers left his party and created a new party called after Birgitte Nyborg's party in Borgen. So it's all kind of meta getting a little too crazy right now. No, but what I think was most interesting was that I remember writing a scene at a press conference where a journalist would, instead of asking about the law or the political work that the prime minister was doing, he would ask her about her wardrobe. And I got so many notes back saying that would never happen. And then, when we finally got a female prime minister, one of the journalists stood up and asked about her shoes. And it was such an embarrassment to democracy. And to...
It's unbelievable it actually happened, isn't it?
But it did happen, and I actually think that we were a little too soft on it. I think that the real first Prime Minister, Helle Thorning, she had a harder time being a woman in office than we anticipated.
In terms of the characters and the storyline, did you have it mapped out, from the start, or was it very much a sort of a building process in terms of those first series that you worked on?
Well, we had the first 20 episodes, the first 2 seasons, we had like an arc, like the journey from being a loving and caring wife and mother on her way out of politics to the more cold machinery professional she is at the end. And we had a premise being, can you maintain power and maintain yourself? And we tried to structurally answer that question within the 21st episodes. Then we knew that we wanted to touch on different relevant Danish political dilemmas, Denmark's relation to Greenland, Denmark's relation to immigrants, Denmark's, soldiers in Afghanistan, stuff like that, or environmental problems or questions that we could raise. So we kind of had that idea. And then we would sit down, 3 of us, and outline 2 episodes at the time. And then me and another writer would take an episode each home and finish that. And then we'll do the same a couple months later. So that was the process.
You would write sort of individual episodes each, or would you write one and then you'd send it back to the other writers or the producers for notes? Like
we would, Jeppe Gervi Gram and I would write 1 and 2, 3, 4, but like a pair. And then Adam Prise, who was the showrunner, you could say, it's different in the Danish system, but he was more like he was the person in between the writer's room and production. So he would kind of take it to the director and go on while we would then write the next episode.
So what were the challenges of going into your first feature as a director? And was it a conscious thing, I want to direct now?
It was so scary. I had never been on a film set before. So basically, I had no idea what anything was. And because we didn't have any money for that film, I did not have a first AD and I didn't have a script supervisor. So we would kind of be lost. Just floating in space, and then they would beat Pilou up, and then we would film it, and we could clearly feel it because it was real, but we wasn't sure what it was. So during that production, I started to learn and understand how to block a scene or what a scene even was when you were filming it. What I realized was that from screenwriting, I knew how to talk to the actors about the story. But I had no idea what the relationship between the actor and the camera was, and that was all news. So
that was your kind of primary method of communication was, okay, the story's doing this, the character's doing this in the story, that's kind of how I'd like you to do the scene, that kind of thing.
Right. And suddenly understanding, if you do this with the camera, how does that affect the actor or the story? If a phone rings will the camera be aware that the phone will start to ring in 2 seconds, so it's over there already, and then the phone rings, or will it react to the phone ringing? And it sounds pretty silly and simple now, but it's pretty big decisions.
And what did you sort of learn from that going forward as a director that you've been able to take into your other work, other than the acting?
That's a good question, but I think I learned that the only thing you can trust as a director is your ears and eyes. It comes back down to what you see and what you hear. There's no intention caught on camera. There's only what you see and what you hear. And we have to make sure that there is an opportunity for the audience to clock whatever it is you want to tell. If not, then you're going to have a trouble in edit room. And I learned the hard way with that first one. Luckily, I had a great editor, Adam Milson, with me, who's also the editor of The Good Nurse. He's been with me for now 15 years. But I learned not to take anything for granted, that intention will never be caught. There's only what we have done that will be caught.
Have there been any moments in your career where you felt like you weren't going to get to, where you are now? Because I think it's an important, part and parcel of the filmmaking journey is suddenly you're making films with Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne, and right down the way you're at film school. There's always a part when you're in it, it's very difficult to get to that next step up.
The interview I did just before I came here made me think, will I ever do another interview? It's part of it. I'm constantly doubting, and luckily. If not, then I would just be there to show that I'm right. I'm constantly on the search for something, and I never feel that I made it, which is like a weird statement. Made what? Yeah, I made The Good Nurse together with a beautiful group of people. And, I'm not an island. I'm not alone. It's not about me making it. It's about finding the truth in what we do. And then once in a while, if we're lucky, we're able to make an entertainment piece of storytelling. And I think that's the key, not to think too much about it. Basically, I'm a very small boy from a town south of Copenhagen, missing my mom and just trying to make it, not knowing exactly what that is. But leaning into these groups of people in this room now, which reminds me of being on a film set with all the lamps and lights and everything around us and behind us, right? Every morning on the set of Good Nurse, when we would all meet up with a cup of coffee and talk through the day, reminded me everybody was quiet. Everybody was just focusing on understanding what they could do to tell the story the best possible way. I think maybe that's making it, creating that space right there was beautiful.
Tobias, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you very much. It's a really good chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can go out there and make your films. You can make it happen. And if you're lucky enough to rise up and do well, it is your duty to send the elevator back down. We will see you next Tuesday as always. Bye-bye.
We hope you liked today's episode. If you want to hear more, visit our Patreon for bonus clips and exclusive content.